Welcome to this Cartoon Smart video tutorial. We are exploring Adobe Illustrator CS5, and in this video we're talking about the tool panel. Now here on your left you'll see that there's a panel with a bunch of tools in it, hence the tool panel. If you don't see that, go to your window menu and make sure that it's selected right here, Tools. When it's selected, you'll have a check mark next to it. Now many of these tools by default are going to have a keyboard shortcut which allows you to work a lot faster. The regular selection tool here up on the top left has a keyboard shortcut of V. The direct selection tool has a keyboard shortcut of A, and you can explore the rest of those on your own and get used to them because you'll work faster if you use them. Now also, a lot of these tools will have a little flyout menu. If you click and hold on them, you'll get a little sub menu that comes out, and if you go to the right where it says tear off and you release your mouse, went over that, you can drag that little panel all over the place. Any tool that has a little black arrow in the bottom right of that box is going to have that feature. So if I click on the pen here and hold and then go over to your right, it says tear off, and you let go and you can drag that right over there. Notice the pen panel has 4 tools in it total. And same thing with the text tool, which is T on your keyboard. Get to know those shortcuts and go all the way to the right where it says tear off and let go. And notice you have a bunch of different tools for your type, and we'll get into that in another video. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to go through all the tools here where it has a little pull-out menu or a tear off, and I'm just going to open those for you so you can see how many tools are really actually stacked in this tool panel here. Some of them don't have it, like the regular paintbrush tool, which is B on your keyboard. Some of these don't have it, but when you actually open these and work with them, I think that they help you work a little bit faster. Now another thing about most of these tools is they have little options where if you were to double click on them, you would open up a little panel which gives you more control over how the tool works. For instance, let's just go to the pencil tool here, and which is N on the keyboard, but if I go and find that over here in the document that I've opened up, which would be right here, almost had trouble finding it because there's so many things out here. That's the thing, if you're working with one set of tools more often, I wouldn't keep all of them out here. That's just going to be confusing. So if I go over to my pencil tool and I double click on that icon, it's going to open up a pencil tool options, and it gives me various controls over how the pencil tool works. And those are things that we talk about specifically in the videos for each tool. So we have the polar grid tool has one. Cancel on that. Most of the shape tools don't. The lens flare does. I will cover those things in the videos that pertain to that particular tool. Now below all the tools here you have some swatches. You have your fill swatch and your stroke swatch. And they might be called something different, but I call them swatches just like your swatches are over here. I just consider them big swatches that show you what color you actually have selected. So if I click on any of the colors in my swatches panel, you'll notice that the fill will change to that color, showing you that that is your active color. And right now it's on top. It's the active swatch. If I wanted to make the stroke the active, you press X on the keyboard just as it says there. That's a fast way to work. If I push X again, the fill color becomes active. So the X basically just toggles which one of these is going to be active. So if you're working with your fill, you want to select a fill color, make sure that's on top, because I do it a lot. I accidentally change my stroke color when I'm trying to change my fill color only because that's on top. So your X is quick access to that. And notice that when I'm pressing the X, look at the swatches panel, you'll notice that when I press X and make the swatch active, it turns to black here in the swatches panel. But X again and make the fill color active, it switches over to the green. And this little arrow here actually swaps them. And you can do that with Shift X. So if I click on this, it switches the fill color and the stroke color. So Shift X does that. And that's another handy little fast tool for working. All right, and right below that, you're going to have a little color tab, a gradient tab, and a none tab. If I happen to be working in the gradient mode, and since I just did that, let me take the little gradient panel and put it over here. You'll notice that the color tab has the less than symbol. The gradient has the greater than symbol, which is just next to your M on your keyboard. I think of them as arrows most of the time, but they mean less than and greater than. And to the right, the none panel is going to be your slash key, which is the same as the question mark key. It's also right to the right of your greater than and less than keys. So if I am working with a color, or if I'm working in this gradient, I can just click on this color panel to go to the active color. And if I were to click on this little gradient tab, it switches me back to the gradient, which makes my little gradient panel here active. And if I want to remove the fill color or the stroke color, depending on what I'm working with, I can do that. So let's take out a shape. Let's just go right over here to our panel that's already open and just click the rectangle. And you know what? We already have a graphic. I'm actually going to just click on the tool panel graphic, which contains the gradient that is active here. So if I want to switch over to my color, I can just click that, and what it does is it makes the object I have selected, it switches that to the active color. And I could also just switch back to the gradient that way. So I could also just use my keyboard shortcut and make it a lot faster. So there's the less than symbol and the greater than symbol right there. And the less than symbol just kind of points to the left, the greater than symbol points to the right, and it's real handy to switch back and forth from your gradient to your normal fill. And of course to the right of that, you're going to have your forward slash or your normal slash, and if I click on that, it's just going to remove the fill altogether. And if I go back to X to make my stroke weight active, let me click away first so you can see that this has a stroke attached to it. I click on that, and being that my stroke is active, if I click on that slash, which is the same as the question mark key, it removes the stroke as well. Right. So if I go back over to that, I'm going to make the stroke active again, and if I click on that, it's going to bring back the color of that. Now since I've switched over to the stroke, this little tab here is going to now refer to the stroke color. So if I go to my fill color here, and being that it's active, and click that green again, now green is now active over here. So if I were to be working with my, select my object, now if I'm working with my gradient and I want to switch back to the color, it uses the most recent color, whether it being that you are working with your stroke or working with your fill color. Now we'll get rid of that and go to just a solid fill color here. You know I love those greens. If you've watched any of the other videos yet, you'll notice that I tend to gravitate towards green when I'm using a color for a demonstration. Now let's talk about these little things here. Now this little tab here is, I'm going to call them tabs, is draw normal. And what that means is if I create some more objects, by default they're going to end up on top of the last object that I created. So let's get rid of those. Now if I click on the draw behind, now every new object I create is going to end up behind the previous object. Now that's really handy when you're actually creating some artwork. I know that was kind of just a rough demonstration. But let me take the blob brush tool, which I could come over here and find, but it's easier to find it right here because there's just too many things open here. Let me, actually, you know what? Let me take that solid fill out once more, and let's do something with the blob brush tool. And I love this tool. Since I've started really playing around with this and working with it, I'm sort of addicted to it. I'm going to take my size of my brush up a little bit. I don't know if you can see that. So now with the Draw Normal button selected here, the tab, whatever you want to call it, of course everything I draw is going to be on top of the previous object. Click on the Draw Behind, and as you can, same color. I'm actually going to deselect that. With the Draw Behind and my brush tool selected, you'll notice that it's going to be drawn behind the last object that was actually drawn. Unless you're using the blob brush tool here, it's actually going to combine it if you have your settings right. So let me just delete all that. And now the most interesting out of all of these is the draw inside. And what that does is it's a very quick way to mask your objects so you actually can draw right inside an object really quickly. Now, of course, you have to have an object selected for that to be active. Now, with my square selected, actually, you know what? Let me deselect that for a second and change the color so it's more obvious. Let's maybe go to this orange right here. You know what? Maybe even yellow. I'll choose the yellow. But as soon as I select this, it's going to change to that color anyway, so it really didn't matter. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take make sure that the draw inside is selected. And when you're using that, you'll notice that there's a little dotted line that goes outside of your object. And that's going to indicate to you that it's now going to allow you to actually draw inside that object. So I'm going to take my blob brush tool once again, and I'm actually going to draw inside there. Actually, you know what? That was a great way to do it, because by default the blob brush tool is going to go back to the black color. If I were to try to draw another object in there, it would have ended up being the same color, and I would have had to go in and change it. So you can see that while I'm drawing it, it's going to show me that object on top, but as soon as I let go, it's now inside. And if I deselect that object, or double click outside it to escape from that mode, now when I grab that object, it all moves as one piece, as if it was grouped. Okay, so those are very handy. You know that they're there, and use the keyboard shortcuts. The draw normal is going to be Shift D. The draw behind is going to be Shift D as well. You just toggle between them. So if I have like an object, and just hit D on the keyboard to make it default. So Shift D is going to switch between these tabs here. So you can see the first one is going to be draw normal. Shift D again goes to the draw behind, and Shift D once again goes to the next mode, which is going to be draw inside. So that's a quick way to access that, and now we can get rid of that. Now the next thing is going to be your screen mode, and it's also F on your keyboard, but if you press it once, you're going to get this little flyout menu. We're in normal screen mode at the moment. I can go to full screen mode, click on that, and you can't see my whole monitor, or you can't see my whole desktop due to the fact that I'm recording this video and we have a limited area to work with, but it's actually just covering up pretty much everything else on my desktop. It may work differently if you're using Windows, but you're going to have similar options. So if I press it one more time and go to full screen mode, now I'm losing all my tools, my control panel, and everything. So if you're working in this mode, this is definitely going to be a situation where you're going to need to know what your keyboard shortcuts to everything. Otherwise, you're going to have to keep going back and forth from different view modes. Now, being that I've gone to this full screen mode, I've lost all my tools. Now, I have to remember that F is going to be the key that gets me back to normal. Okay, so F is what toggles those screen modes. And now I'm back to normal. Also, one thing worth mentioning is at the top of your panels, which just about any panel you have, you're going to be able to press that little red dot and get rid of them. There you go. And also at the top of the tool panel here, you have a way to actually close that if you don't want it there. But I can't imagine anyone not really wanting that unless you only work with a couple tools and you know the keyboard shortcuts. But I'm going to go back to my window menu and just go back to tools again and make that active, because I do love my tool panel. Now at the top right, you can have these little double arrows here, and if you click on those, it changes your tool panel from a single column to a double column. Of course, now you can see that when I change to a single column, the video limits actually cut off the bottom. But that's a preference whether you want to work in single mode or double mode. So that is the tool panel. For Cartoon Smart, I'm Brian Zakowski. Thank you for watching.